Shandon Baptist Church exists to make, mature, and multiply disciples of Jesus Christ one life at a time in the Midlands and beyond.
Well, no matter the organization, leadership is needed as a backbone for success. Those in leadership have to have the skills and knowledge to make tough decisions, stand up for what they believe in, and to work through conflict. I'm Dawn D. Mercer Plank. Today in our series of great questions, we ask, why is leadership development an essential practice for a growing church? The leader of Shandon Baptist Church, Senior Pastor Dr. Daniel Dickard, I can confidently say, loves to lead. So Daniel, what has it been in your personal life and in your public life in the pulpit that has made you so passionate about leading and propelling others to lead?
Well, I love to lead. I can't say, Donnie, that I'm great at it, but I do love to lead. And the reason is because leadership is discipleship. For me, leadership is not about power or position. It's about people. Jesus didn't just gather a crowd. He called and equipped leaders. One of my favorite books, in fact, it's probably my favorite book outside the Bible, is The Master Plan of Evangelism, where it essentially takes the life of Jesus and shows how he led people in small groups, even more so than his mass ministries, that he was always investing in people. So when I lead, I see it as an extension of the Great Commission to make disciples who make disciples. And in my personal life and in the pulpit, I've seen firsthand how good, godly leadership can shape a family, a church, and even a generation. So leading is not just about climbing higher, it's about lifting others up. But another reason, I've been shaped by great leaders. I've had some wonderful leaders around me who have invested in me. They've challenged me, encouraged me, gave me room to grow, and that's a legacy that I want to pass on. But also because the church needs healthy, humble leaders, maybe more than ever. You know, we live in a world that is full of brokenness and confusion and noise and just the expressive individualism that we see. And I think that the church needs leaders who are anchored in truth, full of grace, and willing to serve, not just to speak. Leadership is not about making a name for ourselves. It's about making Jesus known. So, yes, preaching's important, administration, pastoring, but I think that leadership is something that is critical. But if you're going to lead well, you have to follow well, and we all have to follow the Lord.
Talk about what you ideate when you say leadership in the church. You're not just talking about the executive staff, right?
That's right. I'm not referring to pastors, the executive staff, or those with titles. Leadership in the church is much broader and deeper than that. When I say leadership, I'm talking about any person who influences others, specifically in our context, towards Christ. So leadership is those who have influence. The old definition, I think I heard this from Jim Collins in the book Good to Great, that he said that if you think that you're a leader and that no one is following, that you're just taking a walk. Leadership always has those who are following alongside. So it's influence, but specifically it's influence towards the Lord. It's spiritual influence. If you're helping someone take their next step towards Jesus, then you're leading.
You know, one reason for leadership development, really in any organization, is for succession planning. Here, at any time, staff or teachers may be called elsewhere. So why is succession planning key for a church's stability?
Yeah, I love that phrase, succession planning, because it's more than just filling positions when someone leaves. It's about raising up the next generation of leaders today so the mission of the church remains strong tomorrow. Ministry should not be built around personalities. It's about building the foundation of Christ, His church, and multiplying faithful servants. So let's think about those in the Bible. Moses and Joshua, Paul and Timothy, Elijah and Elisha. Throughout Scripture, God's people were most effective when leaders were intentional about passing the baton. I've got a story to tell, and I hope that I don't get in trouble for sharing this, but it's one of my favorite people who's been connected to Shandon Baptist, our former pastor, Dr. Dick Lincoln. So Dr. Lincoln was preaching for me a couple years ago when I first came to Shandon, And I shared with him, I said, hey, please, come into the office, the office that I occupy right now. I said, after all, I said, it was your office for so many years. And he responded back. He said, Daniel, it was never my office. He said, it was just an office that I would pass on, and you'll pass it along to someone else. And, what he was saying was just a great reminder that we are all, for those of us who are in ministry, interim pastors. Or if you're in business, you're an interim to some degree. You're always passing it along. And that's something that we need to be reminded of. It's not about us. It's about passing along to the next generation. So succession planning is a safeguard for the church. Life happens. Leaders move on. You have retirement, health crisis, and other challenges. And if we're not preparing others to step in and step up, we leave the church vulnerable to confusion, to decline, or even to disunity. Again, I referenced Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, but he said that the greatest organizations are those that did better when the CEO left because they built such a strong team. If it fell apart when that person left, it probably meant that person was not a good leader, which is just something that's important for all of us to see when we're in leadership.
That's good. It is a well-known principle that in numerous sectors of life, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. Why is that rule not God's plan for the church? And how does leadership development guard against burnout for those who are trying to carry the load?
Yeah, I think that 20-80 principle is commonly known as the Pareto principle, but I like the 100 to 100% ratio, and that's more of the biblical model. So, I think about Exodus, when you have Moses and Jethro. Moses tried to carry the weight of leadership alone, and his father-in-law, Jethro, wisely told him to raise up other capable leaders to share the responsibility. Even in the New Testament, where we see the first installation of those who were deacons or forerunners to deacons, Acts chapter 6, as the early church grew, the apostles faced a crisis and widows were being overlooked in the daily care and the distribution of food. So instead of trying to do everything themselves, they equipped other trustworthy men to serve. Ephesians 4 says, equip the saints for what? The work of the ministry. And in 2 Timothy chapter 2, there are 4 generations that are mentioned when Paul says, pass along these things to other faithful individuals who can share with others also. What you've received, pass on to other generations. And so I think that it's important to see that, biblically speaking, we see this idea of passing along. One of the hardest things, Donnie, for me personally, and I'm trying to learn this in lifetime, I think that it's learning to say no to good things so that you don't miss out on great things. And delegation is something that instinctively I know as a leader I should do, but sometimes I have a hard time. I don't think that it's because I want to micromanage, but I do enjoy the being involved. But sometimes healthy things grow most when we give them away. And in leadership, if someone can do the task, even 50% as well, you might could do it 100%, but they can do it 50%. We'll give it away so that it can grow. So leadership also is about delegation to be able to build up those who are behind us.
So, while it is all about God, it is attractive, I think, to outsiders to see strong leadership within the church. Talk about the sense of reassurance that can give those who are looking for a church home.
Yeah, I think that whether it's in the church or just the human nature itself, we desire to be led by those who are humble, by those who are authentic, by those who are competent. Stable. Mm-hmm. That's right. Those who bring unity. So, when building a team, I try to look at the 5 C's. The first 3 are, most people know them, would be competency, chemistry, and character. But then I also want to look at their capacity and also their calling. So competency, their character, chemistry, capacity, calling. If someone has those 5 traits, I think that they are going to be a plug and play no matter what context that you drop them into. And for those who are coming into an organization or into a church, they want to sense unity and stability. And a good leader just does not provide those things. A great leader, though, can bring people together towards a common vision, towards a common cause. But I don't think people are willing to follow those that they think are inauthentic. And so that's why it starts with character. Out of those 5 C's, the one that I think is most important is the character. If someone has character, then the other things will follow, but it starts with character.
How does leadership development create an environment that nurtures the virtues and values in our church's mission statement?
Yeah, so our church's mission statement that we exist to make, mature, and multiply disciples of Jesus Christ one life at a time in the Midlands and beyond. So it's this very idea of make, mature, and multiply. It insinuates, it assumes that we are going to be developing leaders. In our context here, I mean, we are in a city where you have military families coming through, a university, the seat of government, that you're going to have a lot of strong leaders that are coming through our community, and they may not be here forever, but we should identify leaders. We should then pour into them and then send them out. I think one of the greatest legacies of our church will be building up leaders who ultimately are difference makers for the world. We may get them for a short season, but if we can help develop them and deploy them, then we have played a part in the Great Commission. So in our church's very mission statement, it assumes the idea of identifying leadership, developing them, and then sending them out.
Yeah, because you've shared your desire for us to go beyond these walls. You're not just trying to build up those in this building to stay in this building, but developing them to be leaders to help in missions work to plant churches.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of our 10 goals over the next 15 years is to plant 5+ churches. And, if you think about it, Dondi, in the history of Christendom, that every church has eventually folded into another church. You could go all the way back to the 1st century, and some of the greatest churches, call it the church at Ephesus, that Paul and Timothy and Apollos that minister it. And that church, the local church may not be there today, but eventually either they planted a church or they rolled into another church. And so I think we have to have that mindset that we're not just here to serve Shandon Baptist Church, but rather kingdom purposes. And hey, if we can start a bunch of churches and see them thrive, we exist today because another church planted us. We should be doing the same and fulfilling the Great Commission.
I was wanting to ask you what kind of person makes a good leader. I do like how you said a few moments ago you had the 5 C's. Again, those were competency, chemistry, character, capacity, and calling. Is there anything else you would add to that in what makes a good leader?
Yeah, consistent faithfulness.
You got another C in there.
Yeah, that's right. There we go. Just the consistency. That's right. Didn't intend to do that. Somebody was going to say because I'm a Baptist pastor, alliteration. But yeah, consistency, day in and day out. In leadership, you never put it down. So there's a degree of the pacing of there's a grind to it, and yet you have to look towards, the future. I think sometimes we can make short-sighted decisions rather than seeing the long-term effect for an organization. And if you have to choose between the two, I think you always, within reason, want to play long ball. What is the best for an organization? But there's just something to the consistency and the grind of everyday faithfulness, knowing that over time you're going to accomplish a lot more if you're just faithful day by day than great strides and gains at once.
Rhett Kendall, who's on staff here at Shandon, he is over my age group of people in our Sunday morning groups, and he's always talking about developing other leaders and looking for leaders. So, how can those in leadership, like the teacher or a director of a Sunday morning group, identify others who may be able to step into a leadership role, especially when we may only see these folks once a week? How do we know if they have what it takes?
Yeah, I think that we have to create environments to be around them. I think that, if leadership is influence, watching how people interact with others, leadership is service. If you will not do it without the title, you'll never do it with the title. So, now there are some leaders that fall through the cracks that, they don't shine immediately, but they're on a different timetable. They develop, they're late bloomers. But there are some core qualities that, we see in those who are the best leaders. They are consistent. They put their money where their mouth is. And so watching, observing, one of the things that we're even doing here at Shandon as part of our long-term vision is we're investing in a leadership pipeline. If we're going to plant churches, then we've got to have, strong interns that then we turn into residents who then we put on our staff, and that it takes time to develop leaders. If you want to microwave leadership, then the results will show as microwavable results. It takes a crock pot mentality. So even, our personnel team that we've been talking about a pastor of leadership position where we would have someone that would spend quality time with our interns and residents. If we want to build this the right way, that we've got to have someone that's a point person to help with our leaders and those that we're raising up. But I think that the future of any church, and I read this last week, I believe that there's a Christian professor that used to be at Baylor University. He said, if you want to see the health of any denomination, you look at their seminaries and their colleges. If you want to see the health or the future health of any church, look at the leadership pipeline that they have for the next generation. And as I said earlier, if we're playing the long ball game here of what's best, not just for Shandon Baptist, but what is best for any church, what is the best for the kingdom of God? It's investing in the next generation of leaders, and even if they're not just ready yet, give them a little bit of influence and leadership, coach them up along the way, and then keep pouring into them. And so that's something that we're trying to do. We're looking at how can we as a church be known as those that identify leaders, raise them up, but then give them opportunities even when they're not 100% ready, so that we can coach them, develop them to the leader that God's called them to be.
Awesome. I don't know about you, but I feel the longer I serve as a leader, I realize how much more I need to learn. How does one hone their craft of leadership, especially when it's for their church?
Put yourself around other great leaders. Don't be intimidated to put people who are more competent and skilled than you are. I often tell our staff, we're going to attack ideas but not people, and put people around in the room who can challenge you, not just creating a yes man organization. I also think being someone who's a constant learner. I read that when Steve Jobs was developing Apple, that he would spend 5 to 10 hours a week just developing his personal craft while growing a large and successful organization. I think that if you see any great leader, you see the qualities that are above the surface, but below the surface, there's a determination, there's a grit, there's a grind, there's a constant learning. And so, developing your craft, putting other great leaders around you, and then being willing to make tough decisions even when it's not most popular. And I think that's what I see in, I'm a younger leader, not being fearful of making decisions, but making decisions based on what is best for the organization and what is best for the mission. I read this last week, and Donnie, I tell you, it really challenged me as a leader. Here's a statement. Organizations fail or they grow one financial decision at a time and one personnel decision at a time. And so with every decision that you make as a leader, that it has consequences. There's a causation and correlation. So an organization grows one financial decision at a time, one personnel decision at a time. So put other good people around you who can help in that counsel.
Are leadership skills more taught or caught?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I think that there are those who are natural-born leaders, but then others that it can be cultivated over time. I think that for those who have leadership qualities, I think the greatest way to grow as a leader is being able to be around those who can provide, good counsel. One of the things that I find and is, being at a church like Shandon, that there are, I wish that there were more hours in a day, but I've even challenged myself as we build this leadership pipeline. It is well worth the investment of me taking 1 to 2 hours a week to have those who feel called to ministry just to walk alongside me in my sermon preparation process. And this is what I've learned along the way. I'm not the only one. I'm not the best one at this, but let me just pour a little bit into what's been poured into me. That's going to create the greatest gain long-term. Again, we're talking short-term, long-term gain. The 1 to 2 hours spent with 10 individuals who feel called to ministry, it may not show up in productivity immediately from the ROI sense, but from the kingdom advancement sense, I think that type of investment goes well beyond anything that we can evaluate or comprehend.
When I was talking about the 80-20 principle earlier, and you said, it should be 100-100 in the church, some people may argue that they want to come to church to be fed and to not have to work, if you will. They may lead 5 days a week at their job site, and they want a break on the weekend. Can you blame them?
No, I don't blame them. Yet at the same time, two things I would say to that, Dondi. One, you cannot build a solid church on spare time and pocket change. It takes sacrifice. But for those who are in staff positions in a church, I often tell our staff, okay, let's say that you are in student ministry and you're the student pastor, the high school pastor, and you go on a weekend retreat skiing. You are tired come Monday morning.
Sure.
But you better be in the office when the office opens, because if someone drives past the church and they gave you all weekend serving as a volunteer, and then they don't see your car in the parking lot because, I'm tired from the weekend. Well, they've given to the organization. You should as well. So I think that in leadership, while if you're going to ask people to, the tide to rise, then you've got to be willing to be a boat that rises with them. And if you're unwilling to do that, I think that you're unfit to lead.
Let's end with one question for those who are listening who maybe attend other churches, especially if they are pastors or other lay leaders within their church. If they know they're weak in leadership development, how can they begin to develop their practice? And I know that's probably a very long answer, but where would they start?
So we've been talking about residencies and internships and staff roles, and somebody may say, well, that's not the church that I serve in, or that's not the organization that I'm in. If you are in leadership and leadership is influence, find at least 1 or 2 people, put them under your proverbial wing, and just invest in them. You be a flowing river, not a dead sea, and just the things that pass it along to them. And, I found that in my own life, the greatest leaders were not those who said, Daniel, we're going to spend 30 minutes talking about leadership. They invited me in their daily rhythms. And again, leadership taught versus caught. I saw their leadership just in the normal rhythms of life. So if you are someone of influence, bring people alongside you. And just you live your normal lifestyle, but you lead along the way. People see Christ in you. That's where you start in leadership. Normal rhythms of life, but bring people alongside you. Let them see your life, and then from that, leadership is modeled.
Great answers to today's great question about leadership. So, while church leaders are to take seriously the responsibility to pray for members, it's also critical that members pray for those in the leadership roles. Take time this week to pray for your church leaders and join us Sunday at 5250 Forest Drive in Columbia. We're between I-77 and Trenham Road. For Shannon Plus Podcast, I'm Dawn D. Mercer Plank.
And I'm Daniel Dickards, Senior Pastor of Shannon Baptist Church. Signing off. We'll see you next week.